Hey, and welcome back to another edition of Coaching with the Bible. This week, Vayakel Pekudei HaChodesh, in the Jewish community, the completion of the book of Exodus, and also a special reading leading into the holiday of Passover, Pesach, which is on its way. And this week, our focus is time management. But first, a note. When I introduced the podcast this week, I called it Coaching with the Bible. And even though for the first 20 some odd weeks I've called it Coaching through the Bible, I realized that those are not the same thing. It's a very subtle change. And so I'm making, this is crazy, mind-blowing, news-altering situation, changing the name to Coaching with the Bible rather than Coaching through the Bible. And the difference is simply this. Coaching through the Bible senses the idea that we're on some sort of we're working our way through it, and by doing it through, we're going to get to someplace at the end of it. And I'm not looking necessarily at this as some sort of a journey to the end. I'm looking at this as a sense that the Bible teaches us, and that it is a resource and a source for us for inspiration and advice and values for our day-to-day living and how we can improve. And so when we coach with it, we're using it as an aid to it, even as, yes, we are certainly on that sort of a journey. So it's a slight shift in the language. I hope no one, loses it over that, but just a slight change. So coaching with the Bible and rather than coaching through the Bible. So what is the value of our time? That's a question that we ask all the time. There's that word again, time. And a lot of the time that we talk about time is money. I hear that one a lot. And so I wanted to sort of think today with you about the concept of time, and particularly the idea of time management. And the reality of it is, when we think about time in general, is that we do not manage time. Father Time never loses. Isn't that the famous sort of quote? The idea that at some point we run out of time. And so because that's true and time will pass whether we do something or we don't do something, it's really a subtle shift and an important philosophical shift when we think about time. Instead of thinking about managing time, it's more, and maybe we have to sort of verbalize this, it's how we manage the use of our time. We're not managing time. Time will pass, time will go, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. It passes quickly, it passes slowly, it passes without us even knowing. But the manner in which we use time, or how we view our time, will ultimately affect how we really think about the value of our time. So recently I was reading an article about time management, and it was written by a philosopher, and made a very important point at the outset, which is that typically speaking, when we talk about time management, we talk about time management from the perspective of a consultant. How to have tips and tricks and strategies to make better use or more use of our time. Makes sense, but it is very much devoid of a basic philosophical question, is what is the point of having time available for us? Or the idea that when we all say, and we all say it, and I'm guilty of this too, I don't have time, is that actually true, or something else sort of going on there when we talk about it in that way? And so the jumping off point here from the Bible perspective is the idea that this week we have a special reading, again, in the religious community, a special reading this week as we are about to enter the month on the Hebrew calendar of Nisan. That's the month of the holiday of Passover. We have a special reading just before that month comes in where we talk about the first commandments that the community of the people of Israel received in Egypt, which was the commandment about sanctifying the moon on a month-to-month basis. And so the Bible in the 12th chapter of Exodus describes God explaining this set of commandments to Moses and telling him the words, "This month is yours." In the Hebrew, it is "HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem." This month is yours. And it's a fascinating commandment in its own right. happens to be rather complex in terms of sort of establishing exactly when the new moon and the new month comes in. But it's also interesting to note that the great commentary, who we've mentioned multiple times, is always mentioned in the context of a critical examination of the Bible. Rashi comments that perhaps this should have been the first verse in the Bible if it is a book simply for the people of Israel, and this is a book about commandments. There's a lot of commandments, and this is the first one given to the community. Perhaps this should be the first one discussed. We will leave that aside, but focus in here specifically on the idea of why is it that the first commandment given to the people is the commandment about sanctifying time. So it's interesting that last week we discussed the idea of sanctifying space. And here we talk about the sanctification, or a couple of weeks ago actually, the sanctification of time. And so I want to share with you a really beautiful insight from another commentary by the name of Seforno. Seforno comments as follows. On that verse, the second verse in this 12th chapter of Exodus, he says as follows. On those words, that this month is your month, is for you the month. From this time forward, the months will be yours to do with them as you please. But during the time of your servitude or your slavery, while you were slaves, your days were not yours. You belonged, however, to others, to their will and to their desires and to their whims. So therefore, first is to give you time. Because once you have given a person time, then they have choices in life. And that is the beginning of freedom. The last few words are mine. So the idea here is that when a person can manage their time, quote unquote, or can control their time, then that gives them the ultimate freedom in life. Slavery and slaves do not have control of their time. They work when they are required to work. They work when they don't want to work. They work whenever it is that the person who is their master requires of them or asks them to do work, they must work. So having the ability to choose, the key here is to appreciate the philosophical point, to choose what it is that I would like to do with my time, will then ultimately help us understand as to how I want to use my time best. And more importantly, then, the idea of time management, which is the prioritization of the time in our life for best use. And not so much about the money value of our time, which is a thing. It's not to something deny it. It's certainly important, and it is a factor in our lives. It is really one of the things that we trade with our employers is our time. They pay us to do the work, and what we're paying them is our time. We're giving them our time. And so we want it to be obviously meaningful and useful and valuable and inspiring and all those different things for us. But it's important for us to appreciate the idea that our time value is not in money, but our time value, philosophically speaking, our time value is in our life. And so it's not a question really anymore of how much time we are given, but it is a question more of how much time we are using and how we are using our time and how we are imbuing our time with whatever it is we're imbuing it with. That could be procrastination, that could be with fun events, that could be spending more time with family, that could be learning, studying, and growing, that could be in prayer, that could be in watching a film, that could be in playing a game. There are a variety of ways in which a person views time, and only at certain points do we necessarily think about the time that we have in the context of money. And typically speaking, we'll do that when it is that our time is not being used effectively or usefully or efficiently. And so we'll think, well, I could be studying right now, or I could be working right now, making more money, and this is a waste of my time. And when we say that things out loud that I don't have time, typically speaking, we probably do have time. One presentation that I saw really went deep on the idea that probably 100 years ago or 150 years ago, people really didn't have time. They didn't have efficient machinery. They did not have tools. They did not have automation. And they had to do everything by hand every single day. And so they really didn't have time. And yet, it was his contention that they did not complain about not having time, whereas we do. And perhaps the reason we do is because we have so many choices, we have so many options, and we procrastinate about making the decisions, the right decisions, or the most useful decisions with respect to our time. And so what's important to sort of appreciate is the idea that time is ours not to manage, but to use, and to use properly. And perhaps the first idea from a coaching perspective, and this I do a lot with organizational leadership, when we're talking about fundraising, is how to organize their work product and their task work for success and the best use of their time. We're going to talk a lot about timing of things. I'll talk a lot about timing of things, getting the timing right on an ask in fundraising. When you're going to ask a certain person for a donation is very important to get the timing right, among other things. In life itself also is key, very important to get the timing right. So to really, when a person is working through the schedule, I admittedly, I'm talking, as I always am, but certainly in this case, talking to myself while talking out loud with everybody else here, about setting the prioritization in order so that A, there is a best use of time, there's an efficient use of the time, and a most successful use of time. And what we can appreciate also is on a deeper level the idea that we can imbue and endow our time with all kinds of beauty and love and warmth and spirituality rather than simply something more base and boring or meaningless and wasteful. And so there's an idea that's brought down in another commentary, which is based on a midrashic text, an exegetical text on the same verse, that talks very powerfully about an image on the new year. And so it's the Jewish New Year, and the heavenly courts are preparing themselves to judge the people, each person at one at a time. And all of the angels are present, and God is present, and all they're waiting for is for the people to sanctify the day as the new year, and therefore all the judgments will come. And it turns out that the people that year decided, it's a much longer conversation about it, decided that that year would be a leap year. And so that there would be an additional day or an additional month in that calendar year, and therefore the new year, the judgment day for the people, would be delayed. And so the ministering angels are appalled and shocked by this situation. They turn to God and say, well, we know that it's today. And God said, no, I gave over control of time to the people. And so if they decide that it's tomorrow, then it's tomorrow. And if they decide that it's next week, then it's next week. And we in heaven will operate based on the manner in which the people have decided to best use the time given to them. See, massively powerful and incredibly beautiful text with a lot of layers and a lot of depth and a lot to think about. But in the context of here, what we can appreciate is, again, not the notion that we can manage time or the passage of time, but we can decide what the time is to be used for and what the time is to be dedicated to. And it becomes a question simply then on our own as to what we do. So the first thing is really to sort of set the time in motion by prioritizing tasks and prioritizing work or prioritizing life, putting things into perspective when we're trying to build out that schedule week to week, month to month, year to year, rethinking the priorities. Where do I want to be spending my time? That's the term we like to use. We want to talk about minimizing empty time, or what we would talk about we're talking about food, empty or wasted calories. So same thing here with respect to time, is to minimize the empty time, the wasted time, and to really figure out how to sneak in or squeeze into those little spaces of 5 or 10 minutes between meetings and comments and things like that. Those are really good first steps in our ability to really make best use of our time. So prioritization, looking to see where the gaps are in our time, and then really maximizing ourselves. This is a key one, so we can ultimately maximizing our time. So I know this is, again, I'm really speaking very openly here about using our best time to get the most rest that we need, so that when we're in the time that we're using for whatever it is, family, friends, work, whatever, that we're present and that we're focused, because we've gotten the rest that we need and we've gotten the nutrition that we need to maximize out the time that we have available to us. I would add in here one of these other things that's really important is to figure out, with respect to our time, about delegation, the notion that perhaps this is not the best use of my time, but rather someone else can do this task, and there's an additional task or an additional project that I could be working on, that I could be focused on, that I could be spending time on, that makes the best use of my power, my world-class skill, whatever that may be, and not something else. So that two things or multiple things happen in the same moment. One, I'm being used optimally. That other task is getting done by someone else who is world class at that, and that's optimally getting done. Everyone is happier with what they're doing. They're finding more value and more meaning in what it is that they're working on. And then ultimately the success is greater. So this is really important. And perhaps the most important one, and this is the one I'm saving for last, is, and they're related to each other, is saying no and stopping. Talked about stopping before, but let's talk about it here. I talk about this also a lot with different clients and different organizations and different individuals that I'm working with respect to their time. The first thing is to say no. There are things that we are allowed to say no to. Certain meetings, certain projects, they don't fit, they don't make sense, they're not best use of us, or they're going to be a drain on where we are present and where we want to be and where we want to spend our time. To saying no. Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. Really, I'm really thankful that you would think that I would be worthy or appropriate for this task. But no, it's okay to say no. We struggle to say no with a lot of these things. To say no. And the second thing is to say stop to ourselves and to pause in the moment and to build into the time schedules that we're trying to manage and manipulate to maximize. To build in pause moments where we ask ourselves, how am I doing? How's it going? Am I on track? I actually have it built into my calendar at 1:05 p.m. every day of the week, except for Saturday. I get a reminder question that I wrote to myself. Hey, how's it going today? Do you need to reboot the day? Because there are days that just simply don't go well in the morning. And instead of letting the entire day go away, I have a chance to reboot and to stop and to then gain back time which was about to be wasted, useless, meaningless, and to imbue it with the quality that I want it to have. So we have all of these opportunities ahead of us. And for most of us, when we say we don't have time, it means we haven't figured out exactly how to best use our time, or we're not willing to make the choice about what we want to use our time for. But time is given to us. We are allotted a certain amount of time. It's one of the great mysteries. We just simply don't know how much. Just the question then becoming our ability to use the time most effectively and most appropriately for the best purposes that they can be used in our lives. And so that is coaching with the Bible this week. The Bible this week teaching us and talking to us about how it is that we're going to use our time best. Take care. Have a great weekend. Those celebrating, have a Shabbat Shalom.